do you remember the 90s ads that were like, be the couch? Do you remember?
Oh, they were terrible. ABC had a whole thing, be the couch. Couch potatoes are your friend. I still have
we have those yellow. It was a
black
year.
And yellow.
Will and I, do you remember the argument we got into that year?
No.
I want to know.
Oh, we went to the party where there was the ABC beginning of the year party where we got those, like, that gear, because that was the whole campaign. It was like, TV is good for you.
TV,
and they were promoting
The couch
Friends
is your
big
friend.
time. Right. And so it was like this like whole, and we got all this stuff like mugs and sweaters and t-shirts or whatever. And we were driving back from the party. You were driving me. It was me and then my college girlfriend at the time and you. And we got into such a huge debate. And I remember, like, we were screaming at each other because you were pro TV and I was anti-TV, and this campaign launched this discussion. And I remember you just being like, what? So it's better for a whole family to just sit around with their noses in books, nobody talking to each other? And I remember I finally just had to say, Will, you're going to drop us off at home and I don't want to talk about this anymore. It's like one of the few times I get cut off. But it ended up being, I ended up doing a whole thing in college. I think later on that year, that was actually about the negative. I did a presentation about trying to research the negative effects of television. And I came out on the other side. It was funny. So you did change me. You know, you talk about times when I've changed your opinion. This was a very clear time when I got so flustered and upset with you, you know, because in part I felt being anti-TV was important to me because I think at the time it defended the way I had been raised, you know, which made me feel different or special from everybody. And I think also at that time I was very frustrated with Boy Meets World and you know, the sense of the lack of control I felt in my life. And so blaming TV or thinking that TV is this like awful monster was somehow the way I was processing it. And I remember you just like cut through all that bullcrap. I also had a friend at the time who said to me, he was like, you know, Ryder, you hating television and then working in it is sort of like people that you know, work at tobacco companies, but then don't smoke themselves or talk about it. And it was like, right, there is some sort of ethical problem
dilemma
here. And it was, But anyway, you totally changed. I remember that college semester, I ended up doing a whole presentation about television. I went into the history of television, and ended up sort of positive about, you know, of course, that there aren't that many negative effects to television watching necessarily, but there's always been a moral panic around it. Every generation has a moral panic around
it is a pretty horrible campaign.
I just remember be the couch.
Be the couch. I still have a mug sometimes I'll grab it just by accident with all my other mugs and it just says ABC on one side and in bright yellow, the couch is your friend.
I
on the
love
other
it.
side.
I wish I had that mug.
And
Welcome to Pod Meets World. I'm Danielle Fishel.
I'm Ryder Strong.
And I'm Will Friedle.
I don't know if you've heard, but we've got merch. That's right. We have got shirts on shirts on shirts. Some might say we have too much shirts, which is one of the shirts we have. We have a Pod Meets World shirt, a Too Much shirt. We have a shirt with a heart that says Pod Dismissed, which is super cute. And I don't know if you heard the episode last week with Lee Norris, a.k.a. Stuart Minkus, but we have a Hold the Plane for Minkus shirt. But we only have that shirt for 1 week, so please jump on it. If you want it, grab it now, get it while it's hot. You can get all of the shirts at podmeetsworldshow.com, and if you get your shirt, put it on. Take a picture, put it on Instagram, tag us. We will re-quote you, picture you, we'll re-Instagram you. You'll be on our story. I'm young. So I'm really excited about this episode. Our last episode, we had a fantastic opportunity to talk to Lee. It was so great to have him on.
He's amazing.
He's just incredible. And so is the character of Minkus. And this is a fantastic Minkus episode. Now, this is the first episode you guys filmed. You talked about that in the episode with Lee. We finally arrived. Episode 105, the first episode you guys all recorded together. Killer Bees. Nikki Cox makes her appearance finally. And and we have Dewan Guy as Ellis. He's back. And this synopsis is that Cory enters a geography bee for a chance to be a bat boy at the World Series. Eric is going to an Aerosmith concert with his date, Nikki Cox, and is embarrassed that his mom and dad are going to the same concert.
Yeah, so the thing I remember most about this episode, not only being as nervous as I've arguably ever been in my life, and that's saying something when you're anxiety boy, but I distinctly remember the scene at the end that we'll get to was my audition piece. Like these were the lines I had to say to get the role of Eric Matthews.
When you're talking about the parents being at the same concert as you?
The parents being at the same concert. And I remember the monologue almost verbatim still. Because it was so important, and I worked on it, and I, tried to make it my own. Which, of course, I was very stiff. Eric still didn't, and it's one of those things where watching it now, from a comedic standpoint, I am somehow missing 2 jokes in every one line. And I just want to go back and grab myself and be like, dude, you just missed 4 jokes somehow. Like, you could have made all of that funny.
Not at all.
It worked. It worked at the time, but just where the character ended up, it was like, man, that could have been so much funnier if you do it this way. But that's what I remember most about this episode was being nervous, meeting Nikki.
Yeah.
And this was my audition piece. Like, this was how I got Eric Matthews. So this was a fun episode to watch. And by the way, and I've said this before, we talk about how amazing Lee is, and he's incredible in this. Ben had some moments in this episode that were laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
So I can't wait.
Well, it was written by Michael Jacobs, April Kelly, and Susan Estelle Jansen. I remember Susan, but I don't. Whatever ended up happening to her? Where did she go? Was she just a writer?
She came and wrote an episode of Girl Meets World. You didn't see her when she came back to Girl Meets World?
No,
she did all 7 seasons of Boy.
Was she in all 7?
I'm pretty sure she was in all 7 seasons of Boy. She was one of our regulars.
She was definitely one of our, and she was one of the writers I talked to the most and connected with. She recommended books to me. She's
a Harvard grad, if memory serves.
Oh my gosh, yeah. She talked about her professors, and like she's the first person to tell me to read Hemingway. She told me, she was like, because of course I hadn't heard of Hemingway, but she was the one who was like, you know what, you should read A Movable Feast. And still to this day, that's like a life-changing book for me.
Yeah,
when I was 14 or 15, she told me to read that. But she was great. She was always, we've talked about several, we've said this about a couple of different adults, but she was somebody who always talked to us as equals and like would always sit and hang out with us and like I said, recommend books or movies. And she was great.
Maybe not all 7, but she was there for at least 4 or 5. She was there for a while.
She is one of the people in the folklore of who named Topanga. She is one of the people who may have named Topanga. And Ryder, when you said when she came back and wrote an episode of Girl Meets World, it reminded me that I think that's maybe where I had the conversation with her, where maybe she told me she was the one who named Topanga. I don't know. Guys, my memory.
We got to find this out. We got to find this out. Who named Topanga is the new What's the Matrix? Like that whole thing. Who named Topanga? Because we got to find that. That's too big a piece of television history.
I know.
I think we're going to get conflicting results. I think we're going to have 4 or 5 different narratives, and we're going to have to just pick one.
We're going to have to pick one.
Leave it up to the listener to decide.
Exactly.
We should maybe do it as a mock trial.
I love it.
We'll present evidence. Each one of us will take a case, and we'll present the evidence.
A true crime podcast. We'll just go off on a whole different tangent. That'll be great. Oh, that's so funny.
So to start the episode, we are in Mr. Feeney's classroom. Cory is wearing 2 hoods.
Of course.
Hoods.
Too much hoods.
Too much hoods.
Is he really wearing 2?
He is wearing a hooded sweatshirt and a hooded flannel. And probably a t-shirt underneath, but you can't see it. But,
with a hood.
Yeah, probably a t-shirt with a hood. Oh, that's what we got to make. So we're in Feeney's classroom. Minkus gets the highest test score in his class. Cory gets a C on his geography test, even though he says he studies, or that he studied. Cory argues with Mr. Feeney about the textbook, saying that geography keeps changing. And Shawn throws a paper plane at the back of Minkus's head.
Ow.
So do you remember, I know what Will's going to say about this, because he was there too. It wasn't Minkus, right?
Nope.
It was Lemke.
Lemke, right?
Is it Lemke? So his original name was Stuart Lemke, and it lasted throughout the entire week until right before tape night. And I remember thinking Minkus was such a worse name than Lemke.
Agreed.
Lemke was a great name for this character. But apparently there really was a Stuart Lemke in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia.
It's so crazy. What are the chances? So apparently you can have a name on a television show that goes through a process called clearance, where the legal team at a studio or a network goes through and checks all the names of characters, all the references to brands or whatever, and clears the names legally so that it's okay to use these things. And if there's a name that's common enough Like, in other words, if there's a Cory Matthews, it's likely that there are multiple Cory Matthews in the world, or that there's enough Cory Matthews spread throughout the country, or that it's not one specific place with that one specific name. But it turned out that there actually was one person named Stuart Lempke in Philadelphia. And because of that, that person had a right to sue us if we used their name.
Right.
Unless we contacted Stuart Lemke and said, hey, can we name a television character after you? So rather than deal with that, they decided to just change it to Minkus.
Which is great. I mean, what amazing story.
Yeah.
Also,
I still hear in my head, I hear Ben going, Lemke, right?
Right.
It's Lemke.
But that was also, I remember Michael working with Ben on that beat. No, draw it out, make it longer. He's like, Lemke, right? It's Lemke. He's like, no, Lemke. Like, Michael kind of giving a read.
Line reading?
Line reading. And
what are you talking about? Michael Jacobs gave line readings?
You want is Lemke, right? You want Lemke, like make it a bit kind of thing. And so every time I see that now, I see kind of Michael doing that. The Lemke, right? That was a thing.
Well, you could tell it was a really big favorite of Michael's because we see it 3 times in. It gets called back within minutes.
Yep.
Kept trying bits. Kept trying to see what was going to stick.
By the way, if you are Stuart Lemke, the Stuart Lemke from Philadelphia around 1993, please reach out to us. podmeetsworld@gmail.com. We'd love to talk to you.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be great. So yeah, we get Minkus. Is it Minkus? It's Minkus. And then we get our opening, the absolutely crazy song. I still can't get over it. I've now started skipping it. I was listening to it, the opening.
Every time?
Indy
really?
won't let me skip it. Indy won't let me skip it. He loves it. He loves it. I know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I guess, you know what, listen, there's gotta be a reason why he likes it. A lot of people probably do. I have had to skip it. I just brings me right back to that Hollywood Christmas parade. I have to skip it. Yeah. So then we're still in Feeney's classroom.
It's like an out of tune music box in your head, right? Yeah. It's like in a horror film.
It's like slow. Oh man. By the way, I think I found a picture from the Hollywood Christmas parade.
Yes.
And weren't we we're in cars. You had mentioned that we had floats. I don't think we had a float.
Well, we did it multiple years.
1 year? Oh, okay.
So the year that we had the theme song going, it was a giant float with a globe on it. Can you believe it?
Of course.
Everything
Didn't you
with the
do
globe.
1 year where it was you guys and like Rodney Dangerfield or something
that's
like
a great
that?
story. Me and Ben Savage and Rodney Dangerfield, and we got his car broke down, so he and his wife ended up on ours. It was
Wow.
What show are you on? I've never heard of it, honey. You ever heard of this show?
Oh,
we were like, it's a kids show, Mr. Dangerfield. And then he didn't realize how long the parade was. It was only like, I don't know, a mile.
3 miles?
But it took like an hour and a half. And his car broke down, so we had to get into our car. And Ben and I were just petrified, staring up at Rodney Dangerfield. And he's just like, who are you? Okay, because what ended up happening is the fans knew us because they were all kids. It's like families.
Right.
It's a holiday parade.
Yeah.
So they were freaking out about us. And then only like every, 100 people or so, there'd be some dude going like, hey, Rodney, no respect.
No respect.
And that would all he would
respect.
get. So he kept getting more and more upset that we were getting all this attention and he had no clue who we were. So then he finally just said, you know what? Can we stop? How long is this thing? I want to get off. And they were like, well, we can't stop the parade unless there's a medical emergency. So like 5 minutes go by and he goes, you know what? It's a medical emergency. Get me an ambulance. I got to get out of here.
No way. And they did.
They stopped the parade. Rodney Dangerfield stopped the parade to get away from us. And they took him away in an ambulance. He's like, yeah, it's a medical emergency. I got chest pains. Get me out of here. And we were like, oh my God. So they escorted him away in an ambulance halfway through the parade. But then
what a great story.
Okay, we can relax.
Wow, I'm going to use that if I ever need to get away from this podcast immediately. Like for I'm just going to be like, medical emergency, bring me an ambulance, get me away from these two.
Danielle Fishel, no respect. Oh, that's so funny.
That's a great story writer.
A great Hollywood story.
Hollywood Christmas parade.
So Mr. Feeny announces that this year's geography tournament has a prize to be the Bat Boy at the upcoming World Series. And we realize that Cory is suddenly very interested, even though he has never really been interested in geography before. Cory says he thinks it's a mistake that Feeny wants to take Minkus to the tournament, and Feeny says he's full of confidence in Minkus. And we get Feeny doing the callback. That's actually the second time it gets called back. We get there's Minkus, is it Minkus? Then Cory says Minkus, is it Minkus the second time? And then Feeny at the end calls back and says, no, I have full confidence in Minkus. My confidence is in Minkus.
That's right.
All in the first 2 scenes, we have the same joke 3 times, which means it was clearly a favorite of at least one person.
It must have killed at a table read and at a run through, and they're like, "This is working.
This is the one. We want it." Yeah. So we are then in the kitchen. Eric says,
hold on. I just want to talk about when you see the awards on the wall. You know, I love that because I knew what was coming. I was like, oh, there's going to be something else taking that place. And I don't know if I just remembered that or if it's just a perfect setup. But, you know, knowing that the plaque is going to come or, you know, not come this year, I just love that visual.
Yeah, that was a good visual. I did not even think ahead to like what was going to go in that spot because I don't remember the episode at all. So I didn't remember if Minkus ended up doing it. I wasn't in it. So I didn't remember the episode at all. So I didn't know if Minkus was going to end up coming in and saving the day or so it didn't even occur to me like what's going to go in that spot. It went right past me. But then obviously seeing it called back later is special.
Even though you weren't in this, this is always how I wonder, you know, how far ahead they think. So this is the first episode we shot. They already have to have a bunch written. I wonder if Topanga is even named yet. Like by this point, for the first episode we shoot
4 episodes ahead or 3 or 4 scripts from beyond this.
Yeah, I wonder if the name Topanga has even come out of anybody's mouth yet. I'm just curious.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Think so.
I bet Topanga was probably a last minute addition to the script.
Well, I think that probably what happened, and I don't remember if we talked about this when we did the episode for Cory's Alternative Friends. The storyline was based on the true story that Michael Jacobs actually did try and straighten his hair.
Yeah.
So I bet you that pitch was already laid out as an episode. Like I'm sure that they had by this time. But if you think about it, that storyline, then, you know, that's the pitch. And then it leads to, he gets stuck at this weirdo table because he's ostracized. What if there's a girl at the weirdo table who becomes, you know, a love interest or his first kiss? So I wonder how far along in the development of that storyline Topanga entered, you know, but I imagine it was story first. And then who can be the person that, you know, makes being weird cool? Let's make it a girl character and then created Topanga out of that. But yeah, I have no idea if it was here.
Yeah, I'm curious how far along
I don't think I knew that it was a true story about Michael straightening his hair. I don't think I knew that.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was all based on him trying it as a kid.
Yeah, he actually did straighten his hair, apparently.
Yep.
That's funny. Okay, so we're in the kitchen. Eric says he cannot babysit on Friday because he's taking Heather to the Aerosmith concert.
Aerosmith!
And so Jansen asked me, we went to the Aerosmith concert after we did this episode because...
I think it was the next year. It was probably season 2.
Season 2 or 3.
At least.
Yeah.
So crazy. That was my first concert.
That's awesome. I have a picture of it on my wall.
We went backstage.
Yep. We met everybody, and I have this great photo of all of us with the band. It was great. And we're with the whole band. It's awesome. It's really cool.
Yeah, I would love to see that picture.
We'll put it up on...
We went in a limo.
Did we? We all got a limo together?
Uh-huh.
Where was it? I don't think it was in LA. It was outside of town somewhere at a big stadium, right?
Was it Orange County, maybe? Did we drive that far?
Was it the pond?
Gosh, I have no idea. I just know it was a drive, and we all took a limo together. That's right.
Yeah. And it was everyone.
It was the whole concert. Did we? If memory serves, we did not stay for the whole show. We
went backstage before the show.
Yeah, it was before the show.
And then I think we stayed for a few songs, and then because we were all kids, they brought us home early. So it was kind of like they hadn't gotten we weren't to the B-sides yet. We hadn't heard Dream On or any of the big ones by this point. It was kind of like, they're new stuff, and then we're gone.
Mm-hmm. It was cool. But it was cool, though. Ryder, myself, Will, Ben, and we went with Angel and Vicky.
We did.
Angel and Vicky.
Our PE, our quote unquote physical trainers, our PE teachers, that taught us and the home improvement kids.
Right. For that rec period that we talked about, they would always come every day? They would come to sort of help lead us in our rec time. But they also became friends.
Yeah,
wasn't there business personal edge? Wasn't that what it was called? It was
you're right. It was personal edge training.
Yep.
Yeah. But how did they then become so involved in our social lives too?
Great question.
Because I also have pictures, like we went to baseball games. I have pictures of me with Eric Karros and Rick Garcia and Angel and Vicky at Dodger games.
I went to Amsterdam with Angel.
Yeah. Danielle, we produced a video with Angel rollerblading video.
We sure did.
Yeah, so
Angel and Vicky skating video.
Yeah. I have it. I just sent a picture of it to Danielle
I have it
not that
too.
long ago. I'm
looking at it right now.
Yeah, so we got very intertwined with Angel and Vicky, and at this stage in our connection with them, they were just really good at hustling connections to stuff. Like I remember them getting, like backstage passes to Aerosmith. So they would always just like, call us or invite us to stuff. And they were just always like finding a business angle, or they would get us. Like I remember I got a free snowboard one time because they would be like, hey, this company wants it, which at the time, like I didn't think in those terms. I mean, now I think it's kind of understood that you get like free stuff if you're on a TV show and you just promote it or whatever. But back then they were in that teen magazine circle somehow, I guess, because they were
Did you not ever go to the Nike store?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever do the days where they would bring you to the Nike store and they would literally, it was like the store was empty and they go pick and you could walk out with
Reebok
just...
too.
Maybe it was Reebok. Maybe it was Reebok and not Nike. It might have been Reebok.
Yeah, I think it may have been.
And you did that with Angel and Vicky, or you just did that
I don't know if it was Angel and Vicky or it had something to do with Boy Meets World, but it was just like you could walk around the store and fill up bags of shoes and clothes. And I mean, it was insane. It was not, you only did it once or twice, but it was, you got all this free stuff. And then Angel and Vicky got us Oxygens. Remember that? Which was like the top of the line rollerblade at the time. It was like the coolest thing in the world. They got us these,
remember that.
I don't remember that at all.
They got us these pairs of they were called Oxygens. And I remember other like
Ryder and I
rollerbladers
did an
thinking they were
inline skating video, and we've never heard of it. And we're experts in inline skating.
You're pro inline skaters, aren't you?
Yeah, so I don't know where you're getting this information.
I'll never forget
anybody knows the inline skates, it's us.
Yeah.
I went to Camp Rollerblade. Probably after this first season. There was, I don't know if it's still around, but and it was right in my hometown in Santa Rosa, which is like right near where I grew up. They were the big push for inline skating as like a movement at the time. And in Santa Rosa, there is a Snoopy ice skating rink. And it's the daughter of Charles Schulz, who created Snoopy, and they have this ice skating rink and it's world famous. And she was a huge supporter of inline skating, and she like started Camp Rollerblade, and we would go and like do ramps and have like professional rollerblade teachers come and like it was a whole week of rollerblading. It was just crazy. But that
seems like a camp with a lot of broken wrists.
Oh yeah, people who got wrecked. I remember like there were accidents every day. I remember watching. It was either Cheech or Chong's son. It was Cheech Marin's son, I think, who smashed his face on a ramp, and I watched it happen. Like he did some kind of amazing, because they had like 9-foot ramps. This was like serious. I wasn't that great, but yeah, it was it was like a skateboard camp, but it was before rollerblade, and it was like a skater culture thing, and he just wrecked. I remember watching his face bounce on the ramp. It was awful.
Oh, that's terrible.
Sounds like a fun camp.
Yeah. It actually was, I have to say.
Any camp where you can break some bones is a good time.
Yeah.
All right, scene 2.
Yeah, so Amy says that she will call a sitter and they'll all go together because Amy and Alan are also going to the Aerosmith concert, and Eric is furious. He doesn't want to go to the show with his parents, says Aerosmith is too loud for people their age. And then Cory, Shawn, and Ellis walk into the kitchen holding Minkus hostage, and they introduce Minkus to Amy, and we get him his adorable line, "Call my mother," and yelling his phone number up the stairs.
So
Can we talk about a couple things, first of all? Can we talk about a little bit, we do like to bracket things that haven't aged well. And a little bit of grabbing the weaker kid and surrounding him and pulling him kind of threateningly into somebody's house was a little weird for me. I get
funny,
they played it comedically, and it was a little that was a little weird, a little bullyish for me.
Totally.
But then the other thing, which I'm wondering if this was an inside joke, one of kind of the first inside jokes we had, because we'd just gone through the Lemke Minkus thing. When he goes up the stairs, he said, "It's the only Minkus in the book."
Oh, right.
Which I thought was a joke on the fact that they couldn't clear the Lemke name.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And so it was kind of a straight up inside baseball. Like no one, like some people would think it was funny, but if you knew the whole story on the set, it was like we could clear the name, so it's the only Minkus in the book. That's what kind of went through my head. I'm wondering if that's what it was. I bet you it was.
Yeah,
it could have been. It's also just funny because how many Minkuses have you ever heard of? And so it's also funny just on its own that like, don't be surprised, but there's only one, you know?
It worked on a bunch of levels, but I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons they put it in, because they were able to clear the name because it was the only Minkus. Like there was no Minkus. So.
Yeah.
And we get Lily sitting on the counter throwing away groceries, which is cute. I thought it was funny the way she says, it's hiding the liver.
And this is the first time we've all worked together. I mean, this is the first night we've shot. This is the first night in front of an audience. I'd never been in front of an audience like this before. This is the first time that you see the Matthews family. I mean, it might be the, fifth episode, but we've never done this before.
Yeah.
So that was something that was always going through my head as I was watching this, is like, this is the first time we'd ever done this in front of a crowd.
I can imagine the energy for all of you was super high. Yeah, so nervous. It doesn't come across that way. By the way, it feels very much like we're in the 5th episode and not like this is the first.
It worked.
Knowing Will, though, Will's presenting, he's definitely presenting more, and then he is comfortable in his own skin in this.
Yeah. You think? Just say the lines. Just say the lines. Just say the lines. Yeah, it was just so nerve-wracking. It really was.
Yeah,
but again, it shows how good, like we keep talking about Lee, who
completely in control of his body, in control of his voice.
And the great character, and is holding for laughs already, and I mean, is just so natural.
Yeah. He is. So we go up to Cory and Eric's room. Shawn says that 1 out of every 4 people is a nerd. And if you look around and no one else is there, it must be you. And they want to change his image. They're trying to convince him not to do the geography tournament. And Minkus says he'll only quit the tournament if they promise not to throw the ball at his head during bombardment anymore.
Yeah, this is the scene that bothered me, Will. It wasn't so much because, the grabbing him and taking him hostage was so funny.
It might have been the whole thing. It might have been the whole thing.
This thing, I mean, and this just goes back. We've talked a lot about the nerd stuff. It's so dated. This whole notion of like that there's a normal way to be, and then there's an unusual nerdy way to be, and like the obvious question is maybe just don't throw the ball at the kid's head, but like for whatever reason the logic of this scene is that that's going to happen just because you're so different and nerdy. So don't you have to change, buddy. You have to have this nerd makeover in order to be accepted by everybody else, and that blows, man.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. It does. It absolutely sucks as somebody, as not that kind of nerd, but as a fantasy nerd and like that type of nerd growing up. You always were a bit like pushed, and you always wanted to be part of the cooler crowd.
But it also doesn't even matter what it is, right? Whatever it is, if you're an outsider, like in the 90s, if you were different in any way, you were
bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really the worst part of American culture, but especially in the 90s, it really reached its peak. This sense that like, if you're cool, you do these certain things, or you watch these movies or these TV shows or listen to this music, and you have this way of speaking and acting. And if you don't adhere to those rules, whether because you're a nerd or you're gay or anything different, there must be something wrong with you. And that's your problem.
Right.
And I am so glad that has changed, because I remember feeling that like uncomfortable. Like I remember wrestling with it myself, and so in day to day, just feeling like there's a mainstream and I should adhere to it or live up to it. And then there's and so the fact that we were encouraging that on our show it's a real bummer.
It is. Well, I mean, I remember talking about when you're a kid, especially during the 90s, 80s and the 90s, anything different was bad. Anything, even if it was something good, it was bad. Yeah. So I was an actor and I was on a show on Nickelodeon, and I thought I was doing something positive and cool. And for a good year, in probably 7th or 8th grade, every time I opened my mouth to answer a question or do something in class, somebody would go, "I'm sorry, I was just acting." It was just a thing because that was a John Lovitz thing on SNL. And every time I opened my mouth, so it just made me not want to speak. Like I'm just not going to raise my hand and answer a question.
Oh, I was completely outcast in my high school.
In my junior high, I was made fun of. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like you're doing something positive and something great, but it doesn't matter. You're different. You're just different, and different bad. Yeah. And so it was, we did lay into that a little bit, especially in this episode. It's like, well, you got to like sports or you're bad. Mm-hmm. And it's
That's just such I think it probably still happens nowadays, even though like that idea writer that you're talking about isn't quite the same now, where, if you're interested in anything outside the norm, you have to change, something must be wrong with you. That is different, thankfully. Mm-hmm. But like the ages of 11 to 13, maybe even 14 are just rough. Yeah. Everyone is trying to blend in and fit in, and please don't let anything make me stand out. That's true. So
no, there's always a battle of some sorts, but whether it's not as black and white, right? It's not as like either or. I mean, I think that there's now just a general recognition of plurality and notion that and diversity, that you can be a different type of person. We
it's celebrated a lot more than it was, which is good too. Yeah.
We probably talked about this maybe too much, but it was a monoculture. Everybody was watching the same. We had 24 million people tuning into our television show, and we were not the biggest show on television.
Yeah,
that's crazy. So you think about how that, tells people, or sort of creates a model of like, this is the way to be, this is the show to watch, these are the movies that everybody, and now I think there's just so many different types of content, there's so many different types of clothing styles, there's so many different types of music, I mean, whatever it is, it seems like there's more of a recognition of plurality. But yes, I think locally within like a given classroom, this is always going to be a struggle, right? There's always going to be status games. There's always going to be a struggle for status and who's cool
popularity
and who's not. Popularity of some sort. Yes, but hopefully it's not based on such an easy archetype or an easy stereotype like the nerd versus the non-nerd.
Well, the thing that amazed me was as I got older and tried to let go of a lot of that stuff that happened to me in middle school and things like that, and became friendly again as an adult with those kids I grew up with, you found out that almost to a person, whether they were popular or not, they also hated it. They were also having the worst time in middle school or the worst time in high school. It wasn't like, oh man, I've met like 3 people in my life that was like, high school was the best time of my life. Everybody was struggling with it. Everybody hated it. And you thought you were the only one going through it. And even the popular kids were like, no, it was terrible on me too. I had a bad home life, or I struggled to stay popular. Or if I did that, you had an eating disorder. Everybody had something.
Yeah.
So we get back into the kitchen, and Eric tells his parents they cannot go to the Aerosmith concert. Eric says it's his first concert, but his parents say actually they went when Amy was pregnant with Eric. And Alan says they have third row seats. He jokes about how old guys get good seats. And Amy says maybe they can get Eric and Heather decent seats so they can at least see the stage. But Eric says he doesn't want to be at the same show as his parents. And he leaves in a huff saying he's going to go see if he can get tickets to Eric Clapton.
Acting.
I also thought there was a line from Rusty where he says, get a clue. And it seemed like that was another thing they were trying to make happen.
Trying to do it. Yep. They were definitely trying to do it. And I'd like to just quickly give a shout out to my giant purple sweatshirt.
I liked your giant purple sweatshirt. That for some reason fit at the top, but it was very, very bottom heavy. Yeah. Very bulbous in the sleeves as well.
Bulbous. Yes. Yes. Bulbous is a good way to describe that sweatshirt. Yeah.
I think for me in this episode, one of the things that just seems like it's a little weak, the whole premise of you being so unhappy about them going to the concert alone just has really no legs.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I felt like there needed to be something more. Like, I'm worried you're going to embarrass me. You've never met Heather or something. There needed to be more there than just like.
So offended that you were going to be in the same place that Eric was. That was it.
By the way,
at the same place.
I could see the storyline being like, wait a minute. We're not sitting together, are we? And then when you find out we're 64 rows apart, being like, good. Cool. Please, just pretend, if you see me, pretend you don't know me.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder how much of this was based on the idea that they were trying to establish. I mean, if this is the first episode we're filming, this would be Rusty's first episode too. Mm-hmm. And I think that establishing that the parents were not, that they had some countercultural street cred, that they were kind of cool.
Right. They're not regular parents. They were cool
I think
parents.
that was very important to attracting Rusty to the part, because that's kind of Rusty's vibe. And I think that was important to establish for Michael and the team. Like, these are not going to be the typical sitcom parents. They're going to listen to cool music. They're going to wear their denim jackets, as we'll talk about later. And like, they're going to be, and so I think in order to create that tension, they had to force this situation where Will's character is upset about it, like, or overly upset about it, because like, really, there is no conflict here, right? It's such a it's a mild problem.
It's also an acting choice, because this exact same storyline could have been taken differently if it was handled by season 6 Eric as opposed to season 1 Eric. It's
I don't
the
think
same
you beat
dialogue.
yourself up so much, man.
No, I'm not trying to beat myself up. I'm saying the acting choice of playing it angry,
right?
As opposed to but here's the problem lighter and funny.
Here's the real problem with it. What does Eric do? Does Eric make a choice?
No.
Does he change? Exactly. So it's a completely inactive protagonist in this.
It's basically just whining.
That's bad writing. Like, there's no choices made. Now, if Eric decided to do something, and then because of that, there was a backfired situation,
he calls and cancels the parents' tickets so they can't go. There's some kind of something like that.
But instead, it's just a presentation of a situation, and you complain about it.
Yep.
And then that situation keeps happening. Yeah. And then it happens again. Yeah,
and then complain about it in front of the girl who's kind of there for no real reason.
Complete inactive protagonist, no choices. Yep. It's a useless,
It is absolutely, but again, played angry. Like I'm angry the whole
What's the only
episode.
thing you can do? You have to create conflict because there is no conflict.
Exactly. You're just creating conflict.
You're struggling as an actor to create conflict. It's not your fault.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
So the next day,
Bulba sweatshirt. That's what stole the scene.
The next day, we're at school, and Minkus tells Mr. Feeny he's resigning from the tournament. He says the tournament doesn't fit in with his new image, which is Stuart Minkus, regular guy. Minkus says that exceptional guys get bombardment balls thrown at their heads. Do you guys know of a game called Bombardment? Is that a real game?
No. It is. They've just changed the name of Bombardment is just Dodgeball.
Oh,
that's Bombardment.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Dodgeball.
Okay. But is it called Bombardment, or did we call it Bombardment?
I think they called it Bombardment. I don't know why, but it's essentially Dodgeball. That's all Bombardment is. If unless somebody's like, no, the rules are different. It's the same. You throw balls at people. If it hits you, you're out. If you catch it, the person who threw it is out.
I wonder if Dodgeball is trademarked or something.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is.
So Mr. Feeny tries to see if his image can wait until after the tournament. Cory stays back in the classroom. He's ready for Mr. Feeny once Minkus quits. And Mr. Feeny said there won't be a tournament. If it's going to have to be Cory in the tournament, then there will be no tournament. Because Cory has never shown any interest in geography. And Cory says he's willing to learn. Mr. Feeny says that, okay, he will agree to prep Cory for the tournament, and he hopes that the prize is actually going to lead to him wanting to learn. And now we get Feeny and Cory for the first time kind of in on a little bit of a scheme together.
Yeah.
Not really quite a scheme, but yeah, it's cute that they're all right. Let's see.
They're taking
how
a chance
this
on
goes.
each other, right?
Exactly.
Like I like that Mr. Feeny is willing to play this out as opposed to.
Well, that's what I mean. Again, you think when you look back, Feeny knows he's going to lose. Feeny knows he's not going to win, but he's also seeing if Cory's going to actually learn. I mean, I think that's what it is. Don't you think that Mr. Feeny, by this point, he knows it's like, all right, the title's gone. I have no chance. Cory's not going to win this thing. But if I could get this one kid to actually learn something that he didn't want to learn before, then I win as a teacher anyway.
Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, the only lose-lose situation here for Feeny is if he doesn't end up learning anything and he loses the tournament. But the hope is if I can at least get him to learn something, I will feel like a winner. And so we are back in the Matthews backyard. Cory is studying geography while Shawn and
Can I just
Ellis,
jump in?
Yeah.
I so indelibly remember Carpe Diem, Mr. Feeny. And it's funny because I wonder how much I remember that so vividly because it was probably the first time I'd ever heard that phrase, Carpe Diem.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's so interesting.
He also takes that pause, though. There's the pause between Carpe Diem and Mr. Feeny. He doesn't go Carpe Diem, Mr. Feeny. He goes Carpe Diem, Mr. Feeny.
Yeah, well, we said it for a while, but I just, it's so funny because the second it came out of Lee's mouth, I was like, oh my God. But yeah, I wonder how much of that is because I was backstage or at our table read, hearing that and going, what is this phrase? And I probably asked somebody or looked it up. I probably asked you, Will, because you spoke Latin at the time or read Latin at the time.
Spoke and read Latin. Well, at the time I did actually, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I just, now it's one of those things you hear all the time, but at 12 or 13, I probably had never heard that phrase before. So anyway, that line is like etched in my brain and it's Lee's voice every time I hear it.
The other one we said all the time was Dewan's line. We said, what's the point of playing if we can't throw it at his head? We said that for years too. We said that for years too because we thought that was so funny that we just kept saying that as well. Yeah.
That's funny. All the lines that we used to repeat backstage.
Mm-hmm. You never knew which one was gonna hit, and all of a sudden it's an inside joke.
A lot of them came from the first season, though. I think, and I think it's because we were all so aware of each other's lines, and we were an ensemble that we were working our way through the script, and there's lines that come and go, and jokes that hit or miss, and even something that might miss in the final tape night could have landed so hard during a rehearsal that it became an inside joke for us.
Exactly, even if it didn't make it to air.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Matthews backyard, Cory is studying geography. Shawn and Ellis try to get him to the park, and they say that he's studying too much. Minkus shows up in one of the greatest outfits of all time.
He looks amazing.
The largest shorts I've ever seen on a non-clown. Just amazing. Those big yellow shorts.
Oh, there they are. Look at that.
They are. They're shants,
man.
but they're also they're also just like a barrel around his waist, and the shoes. His feet look
and the
huge.
Backwards hat.
I mean, of course, a hood and suspenders to hold up those shorts. It's just incredible. We will put this picture on our Instagram for you, Pod Meets World show.
Wow. You wonder about the outfits they rejected. Where they were like, nope, that's not going to work. That's not. Oh, there you go. Got it. Nailed it.
Nailed it. That's the one.
Wow.
So Cory says he needs Minkus's help studying, but Minkus says absolutely not. He tells Feeny he watched MTV's House of Style, which is where he put together this outfit. And
what
he
was
says,
MTV House of Style? It was a show about clothing?
Yes, and it was hosted by supermodel Cindy Crawford.
Oh, that'll work.
But did people dress like this back then, or
yeah, I think it was a very kid and play style, mode of dressing. My husband at the time dressed very much like this. Jensen Carp would have worn an outfit very much like this.
I want to find a photo of Jensen.
Can we please find a picture of that? Please find a picture of that.
We'll find one. I'm not sure he ever wore suspenders like that, but he definitely wore oversized.
Suspenders doesn't seem accurate. Suspenders kind of became cool like late 90s in like a... Yeah. There was a moment I did remember wearing suspenders later in the 90s, but...
You wore suspenders, really?
Cross colors was big in the early 90s.
Oh, there's Teen Magazine shoots of me in suspenders.
Yes, there are. Yeah. We'll find that as well.
We'll look for those for sure. I have them all in the garage. So Minkus says he's now leaving to go watch Beavis and Butthead. And we get
our first Beavis reference, actually.
And that's it got a laugh.
It got a laugh. That's why they put it back. Yes.
That's why they put it back in Cory's Alternative Friends.
Exactly why it came back. It got a woo, so it came back.
So the people in the audience loved them some Beavis and Butthead.
Wow.
It was popular at the time.
So then we are back home in the kitchen.
Before we're back home in the kitchen, this is also, I thought, isn't this the moment? Ben had a great moment that made me laugh out loud. Isn't this the snort? Where he kind of, where he goes... He goes... Because he's now like the quote unquote nerd. So it's like, he's snorting. But the way he did it was actually very funny. Yeah, that was the first time where I was like, okay, that was a good comedic moment right there.
Dewan as Ellis says something like, he's morphing, right? Is that what he says? He's morphing?
Something like that, yeah.
Mutating.
Yeah,
but
mutating.
Ben was very
maybe.
funny. Ben was very funny in that moment, I thought.
I thought they could have made a bigger moment out of it. Because it kind of like, it was really brushed over.
But that's what I kind of liked about it, was just a quick little... Like he snorted. Like it was cool.
It's cute. So we're at home in the kitchen. The family is quizzing Cory on his geography. Eric calls out artists trying to get his parents to go to another concert. So he's naming a bunch of people. I liked the line, Tina Turner, and she says, my mother's.
My mother's, yeah.
That's great. And then I was like, wow, would that have been true? That like Tina Turner's been doing this since...
Yeah. I think there weren't Ike and Tina Turner were the early 60s, their original, band group. I think was I might have even started the late 50s and then the early 60s. And then she obviously moved away and became much bigger in the 70s by herself. And then it was kind of 70s, 80s. Yeah. Man. But I'm pretty sure they would have been the late 50s, early 60s, Ike and Tina.
What a career.
Yeah.
They tell Eric that he should rebel and not go to the show.
Yeah.
And Eric
Why would
says
you want to when you're that angry about this for some reason? Just angry all episode. Just, man,
you
I made a choice and stuck with
choice, Will. You had no other choice. You had to pretend that you were very angry. And then we find out that you're going to be 64 rows behind them, which is very funny to me. And we're at the geography tournament. The kids and their teachers are lined up on stage. The teachers are all giving the kids massages. And
that was great.
I love this beat. Yeah.
I do
and
too.
Seeing Ben in his suit, like, just, it's like so, like, Cory out of his element.
What a great suit, by the way. I wrote down what a great suit. It fit him perfectly. Of all the oversized clothes of the 90s, the suits were not super big. It fit him so well. And it's that great green color. But yeah,
Bill with just do this with your shoulders and rolling his shoulders.
Yeah, are you feeling a little tense?
Such a great moment. Oh, so good.
So funny. I loved it. And so we cut to Cory panicking on the stage during the tournament. Cory doesn't know how to answer the question. We see that the kids are getting very hard questions that we never saw Cory studying.
His face, though, when they cut to him, was perfect.
Yeah.
That worried, ridiculous looking around over the top
so funny.
look was that was my the first time I saw that, actual loud laugh out loud moment. That, Ryder, we talk about the equivalent of the optical flip, where it is then just on his horrified face. It was hysterical.
So funny.
Oh, he was great in that moment.
It is. It's really funny. And Jansen pointed out to me while we were watching it, Jansen was like, you know what made this show different than other shows is that I think other sitcoms would have had him at least get something right. Like you would have seen him maybe not win the tournament, but like he wouldn't know nothing. And instead, he just literally is like, it's as if they're speaking a totally different language than he speaks. Right. And I don't know necessarily whether or not another show would have done that. But Jansen was really like, I think this separates the show, that he really knew nothing.
Right. Well, it takes us on more of a journey, right? Because he's learned something, or he's been studying so hard, which has made him more nerdy, and and we've already established that as the problem. But then the real problem is he doesn't win the contest or doesn't win the bee. Like, so it takes it to the next level. It's good storytelling. This is like you just keep twisting the expectations, because it's like, oh, he's a nerd, now he's gonna go win the contest. And it's like, no, there's still another twist coming. There's still another turn to this show.
Yeah, he still doesn't know a lot.
Anything.
He may have learned something, but he still doesn't know everything he needs to know in order to win a tournament. So Cory doesn't know how to answer the question he's given, and he is left on stage at the very end of his loss. He's by himself, and the girl who wins walks by with her trophy and says that the Bat Boy prize is stupid. I love the voices of those two girls. Mm-hmm. They both had like these deep voices that I just loved. I think they just made them stand out, and they were both so cute. I thought that was you very easily could have had one of your Topangas there.
Yeah.
Could have been you, Danielle.
That could have been me if only I got to audition for the geography tournament.
You were Fish Girl.
Right, I was Fish Girl. So we're in the Matthews family living room. Eric and Heather are back home from the concert, and they are telling Cory that they saw Amy and Alan dancing in the aisle.
This was my audition piece. That was my audition scene. So I tried to look down in the row CC. Are Mom and Dad there? No, Mom and Dad are dancing in the aisles. Had to sit there and say that in New York, then on film, then in LA.
How many times did Michael tell you were doing it wrong and to do it
what's
totally
funny?
differently?
You know what I honestly remember about my audition process? I remember two things. I remember that Ben was there. I remember three things. I remember that Ben was there and reading with us for a different scene that wasn't that. Was a
probably for the pilot,
bedroom
right?
scene. It was a bedroom scene in the pilot that we read together. And then I remember going in and reading. So the process was you would first go to producers. So auditioning for shows back in the day, and I'll do this very quickly, was just the most miserable, stressful, awful day you could possibly imagine.
It still is, man.
It's not as bad. I don't think it's still the full day process that it was, if I've heard, in front of theaters. Is it still the same? Because now everything's like on tape, and they do this, and there's so many.
Now it's harder
like
on tape. You have to have your backdrop. You have to adjust your own lighting. You have to have cameras. You have to have a reader.
No, I'll take that all day
actual
compared
network
to what
testing.
it was.
Actual network testing, yes, it depends on the show, but I don't think they do. They don't bring you in front of a room of 40 to 50 people like they used to.
Which is what it was. You're in a
theater. But I think they would on a sitcom. In fact, they've done test shoots for sitcoms these days where they actually go to a stage and have the actors perform it.
Yes. Oh, I'd much rather do that.
But no, with single
terrible,
camera
though.
stuff, I think nowadays they do mostly like a cinematic sort of screen test where you go to a studio with the director and a reader, and you go do it alone. Yeah,
which is great, because this one you used to go and you'd sit the first day. So I flew in from New York to LA, and then you start at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and you go to producers and say there's 3 of you auditioning. So you walk into a room and say there's 15 producers there, and you read the scenes through however you're going to read them through, and then you come out. And then they'll usually say like, okay, go to lunch. That's going to take like a couple hours. They take their time. You sit there and you wait. You're all anxious. It's awful. And then you get a call from your agent or manager saying, okay, you're going to the next level, which is network. And then you go to like
studio. It would be studio before network.
Studio is next, which is then more people in the room, and it's all the people from at the time we were Touchstone and all this kind of stuff.
Well, also at this point, that's the point at which you sign a contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they make the actors sign a contract before you do your final auditions.
All 3 people auditioning sign a contract.
Yes. And so you're looking at A, how much money you'll make. B, it's a thick contract, and then you'll be how many years you're going to be committed to this thing, because it has all your pay laid out and how much it's going to get. What kind of raise you're going to get as the years go, because they want to lock you in, because oftentimes you're in demand at another show or whatever. So you'd be in first position or second position, and when you sign that contract, you're agreeing to do the show if they select you by the end of that day or week or whatever the period is. Oh, it's so nerve-wracking.
It's awful.
Oh, it's the worst feeling, because then you start seeing your future. You're like, oh, I'm gonna be working this next week or 2 weeks from now or this fall or whatever, and I'm gonna be making all this money. My whole life is gonna change.
Yeah, it's insane. It's awful. And then you get the call whether you've moved on or not. And usually if you then get to network, which a lot of times, depending on what network you're going for, it's literally in this theater room where there's 50, 60 executives sitting there and you perform for them. And by the time you get there, it's been most of the day and you're exhausted, you're stressed, it's awful. Usually if you started with 3 people, now there's just 2 of you, like they've let one of you go.
But you spent all day together too.
Yeah.
So you were sitting around
in
in waiting rooms with each other with your competition, trying to be friendly. Meanwhile, going like, my life could change tonight, or your life could change tonight,
or yours
or we just go back to normal. It's like, oh, the worst.
It's the most terrible process in the world. So in between studio and network, Michael came out and sat down next to me. And he said, I really think you're right for this project. I just need you to calm down and relax and really listen to Ben, and I think you're going to be fine. And I noticed that he didn't talk to anybody else. And Jason Marsden was that guy, my best friend again, who was auditioning with me, and he came out, and I found out later he was like, Ben screwed up his lines during the audition process, which screwed me up. And so Ben, the joke we had was Ben, and he would said this to Jason as well. He's like, oh no, I screwed that up on purpose because I wanted Will to be Eric.
Wow.
He was totally kidding, of course, but that was kind of the joke. And when Jason then came on the show, he's like, you messed up on purpose, right? And Ben would be like, of course I messed up on purpose. But it was that, we were dependent on another actor to come in, and Ben came in, and we had great chemistry. But that's what I remember about not just the scene, but also that Michael was like, I really think you're right for this. I just need you to relax and listen to Ben. And that helped. And then we got the part, but that's what during the scene, that's all I see as I'm standing behind the couch and everything. I just go back to my audition, because that's all it was getting Eric with these exact lines, and then meeting Nikki, who, it was always a casting director who's reading the part of the girl. And then it's like, oh, this is Nikki Cox. And it's like, it just changed the whole thing. So it's very strange to
I got to skip that whole process. I got to skip that whole.
Oh, you're so lucky.
You got tortured in a whole different way.
I got tortured differently.
You got tortured publicly in front of your peers.
Exactly. Congratulations. We all got to watch your torture.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Terrible.
It's
a tough process.
It is
a
tough
horrible
process.
business and a tough process. Yeah.
So, you guys are back home. By the way, who babysat Cory and Lily? Because you guys,
that's a great question.
No one was there with them. It was just,
they're fine.
You're already home. So
I guess maybe Cory was old enough to babysit his sister.
She asked Eric to stay home and babysit them at the beginning of the episode, and then said, "Okay, I'll call a sitter." So I don't know. I don't. Maybe the sitter left when you got there, and that's not an important part to the story. That
that's
when Eric arrived home,
Nebula
the sitter left.
The back of the
exactly.
House. Yes, exactly.
She
it was Nebula.
Okay.
So, we see that you were upset because they weren't in their seats. They were dancing in the aisle, and you are just mortified by that. And then Amy and Alan walk in their concert attire. They've got cool fits on, tie-dye shirts, denim jackets, a prairie dress with necklaces and a vest. Yeah. And
it's
cowboy
not
boots.
Embarrassing at all, but it's not like embarrassing. It's like they're totally kind of normally dressed for even slightly cool parents. It's like they're not over the top crazy where he had
it's not like somebody has a mohawk and
exactly.
Right. But I think but going back to the time period and the place, I don't know. Like, I think just being anything slightly. I mean, in LA at this time, if you were a hip parent, you would be way more extreme, right?
Yeah,
like you'd have tattoos and but in the 90s, then if you were in Philadelphia and you just going to an Aerosmith concert might have, I don't know.
With a hippie shirt, like he's wearing tie-dye. He's crazy.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, generationally, it's hard for us to wrap around.
So all my friends wore tie-dye. So it was like, I was like, oh, they're not dressed that strange. But I guess maybe you're right. Maybe for Philly, and he's supposed to be a grocer, and it's like, what are you doing dressed like that?
I think for mainstream America, there was still this 80s hangover from the 60s, 70s counterculture, sorry, 80s backlash to the 60s, 70s counterculture, where, you know, we were still coming out of this like yuppie period where it was like anti-counterculture. So for them to have any nods to that sort of rock and roll counterculture would have been a little edgy at the time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So this is where the premise started to feel just a little loose for me, because he just asks you directly, like, what? I don't understand. What is so difficult? Why is this so hard for you? And you have this idea that you said your parents aren't supposed to have fun. You're just supposed to stay home and wait for me. And I was like, that's the best answer.
That's the argument you got?
That's the argument here. I feel like just the premise is a little... I agree.
But at least, here's the thing, though, which saved it. At least Eric didn't learn anything. Which, again,
you're right,
when they
left
the room, I was like, where's the mess? He's like, I'm the father that you want. Deal with it. And he walks out, and it's like, Eric, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, it was just kind of that this storyline didn't wrap up in any way. It was just a strange kind of story.
A real waste of Nikki Cox. She said two things.
She's just sitting there the whole scene. And then she like gets up and walks to the door. It's so bizarre.
This is also, for the record, this is Heather. So Eric has talked about Heather since the pilot.
Yeah, you have been dating her for 5 episodes. And
you know what I think? I think they probably wrote this as a sample scene to cast the character of Eric. Maybe. I bet you that this was a scene first. It was a scene first and foremost, and then they had to build a storyline around it in two different, way. But because I bet you, because it's such a monologue on your part, right? Like, there I am, and I think it was a test to figure out who the older brother was. So they probably wrote this as an audition scene.
Yeah.
Cast you and then tried to build an episode around the one scene they had already written. And I think that's why it's not that great, is because it's all about just this scene. Because really, the other scenes in the storyline are just reiterating the same point.
Yeah,
you have 3 scenes that do the exact same tension. And so I think that, they probably started with this scene and then just wrote backwards the 2 previous scenes, restating the same conflict and not really developing it.
I'll bet you're right. Because
this should have been the first scene. And then you develop it into a storyline. But instead, they just went to this scene. Yeah. And so you have the same tensions, and it doesn't develop, and it doesn't go anywhere.
I bet you're 100% right. Because you're right. Yeah. Nothing happens. Like, nothing happens.
Well,
no choices being made.
Did you start dating Nikki this week? Like, this episode? Is this, like, did you guys start dating pretty much immediately?
Yes. I want to say
it's how you met, right?
Yeah, it's how we met. I remember honestly thinking, and shout out to Nikki Cox again, we reconnected 4 or 5 years ago over email. She's such a sweetheart. I remember distinctly thinking the first time I saw her, that's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. And then we talked, and she was so nice and so sweet that I instantly had a just insta crush on her. And we hung out that whole week. I just remember.
So what was a date like? Like, what'd you guys do? Did you go to ice cream?
I had my car, so we
picked her up in your Celica?
In my car. Yeah, we'd go in the Celica.
Did you show off your subwoofer?
I'm sure I did. You know what, Ryder? That subwoofer was awesome.
It was. I'm not making fun of you.
I know.
I worshipped it. That was like.
Yeah, it was. We were like 15, 16-year-olds dating. We'd hold hands, and I think we did. We literally would go out and get something to eat or go to ice cream. It was like it was never serious. It was like.
Did you ever go to Ed DeBevick's?
Of course, we went.
Yes, we have to somehow talk about Ed DeBevick's. It no longer exists, but it was a diner in LA where it was all out of work actors playing characters as the waiters and waitresses. So they would be in character, sort of being like, tough, funny.
Get your elbows off the table.
Yeah, but it was a kid-friendly diner place where it was like
amazing.
A 50s diner. It was amazing. So I actually have a friend who I've become friends with, an amazing actress named Rusty Schwimmer, who worked there. And when I first met her, she was like, I served you back in the 90s.
Wow.
She's an incredible character actor. If you look her up, anybody listening, Rusty Schwimmer is one of the most talented, amazing actresses. You guys would know her in a heartbeat. She's been in everything, and for comedy and for drama. But anyway, yeah, she always talked about how she worked at Ed DeBevick's.
I had my 21st birthday party. It was one of those places where the first time I went there was like 13, and you'd look away, and then you'd look back, and one of the waiters or waitresses would be sitting next to you eating your fries.
Yes, they would do jokes like that.
Right.
They would do stuff, and it's like, what? Yeah, it was so cool.
Were they in character as like Buddy Holly and like Marilyn? Were they pretending to be actual
They were like
people?
from the 50s. No, I don't think they ever went
They
like...
just came up with their own characters.
Yeah, and they would then get up and dance. They would dance to was YMCA or something on the tables.
That's right,
It was awesome.
Yeah. But it was all like milkshakes and French fries and grilled cheese. It was that like 50s diner vibe. Yeah.
They did a spoof of it on Friends where Monica ends up working there and has to get on the table and do YMCA. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that's absolutely Ed DeBevick's. That's Ed DeBevick. It was the
We should
the
bring
first
that
time
back,
I ever
guys.
met Joey Lawrence. We were 14.
We should
it was
do a
Child Actor
Chubby's
Central,
Ed
that place.
DeBevick's.
There you go.
Can we do a Chubby's pop-up? We've talked about this, please.
Let's do a Chubby's pop-up.
Hit us up if you want to do a Chubby's pop-up, but Ed DeBevick's
we have to do
place.
it in Philly first.
Yeah, we'll do it Philly
Great
first.
idea.
Okay.
Great idea.
So Eric says his parents aren't supposed to have fun. Amy says that they got home late because they had backstage passes. They just continue to one-up you with the cool factor. Eric tries to walk out. He's going to take Heather home, but Alan stops them. They send Cory and Morgan to bed. We think Eric is going to get yelled at. And Alan says when he was younger, he had a father like the one that Eric wants now, but he really wanted a father like what Eric has. And so he just has to deal with it. Basically, his own father was like a stick in the mud, and he wanted a cool dad. And so Eric is not appreciating the fact that having a cool dad is maybe better than having a stick in the mud dad. And then he walks out of the room. And
after kissing me on the forehead.
Yeah, kisses you on the forehead.
Or kissing me on the back of the head and then walking out.
And then leaves you guys alone, made you sit down even for this conversation, and then walks out. And you, as Eric, think, oh, did my cool parents just leave me alone with my girlfriend? And you guys go to kiss, and then he pops his head out and says, not that cool, and you turn back on the light. So what was he doing? What was the point?
I guess just leaving you guys alone, but
like
not
still
alone to make out. Like
Right.
they just get alone time, like without other parents and other kids around, without parents and other kids around.
Okay.
So I think it was just like, hey, you can be alone, but you're not going to.
You can
be in the
continue
dark
your
making
date
out.
without all of these embarrassing factors in your life, but we're not going
I
to let
think
you
it was
kiss.
a button joke on a scene that made no sense. I think that's as far as they went with it. It's like, and then they try to kiss and they can't. Like because you look at it and it's like, he learns. They tried to throw in the lesson, but it didn't really work. And then he leaves him with the girl.
You turn the light off. You like turn the lamp off, and then you have to turn the light back on.
Yeah. Well, the rest of the house is perfectly lit, by the way. So it's just turning off the lamp right next to them, as if it plunges them into darkness. It's like, hey, we're in a slightly darker room now.
Yeah.
Like it's very.
This
strange.
might be a good time for too much shirts.
Too much shirts.
Because interestingly, Indy did not really, like when I kept asking him about the storyline, he kept just sort of coming up with other observations, like random little things. And then we kind of got derailed into being recognized and acting. So, it was interesting that I kept, I've edited these conversations down a little bit. But there was like 5 minutes of me being like, but what happened here? And what happened here? And he remembers your storyline. Well, let's see. Give it a listen. What'd you think of this episode?
It was good. I loved all of it.
What about Will's storyline? What was his storyline?
Going to a concert, but his parents ruined it. And then they had a backstage pass.
Yeah.
And they had better seats.
Yeah. You only go to concerts with me and Mom, so you
I
can't.
don't like concerts.
You don't
They're
like concerts?
horrible.
What concerts have you been to?
Bad concerts.
What about Cory's storyline with Minkus? What happened there?
He loves baseball. That's why the O in boy is a baseball. Topanga, whatever her name is.
Yeah, what about her?
She wasn't in this.
She was not in this. We filmed this episode before the episode that we watched last week.
What?
Yeah, they aired them out of order. What did you think of me throwing stuff at Minkus?
I loved it.
Really?
It was so funny.
Wouldn't that be mean to do to somebody? You would get in so much trouble if you threw a paper airplane at somebody's head.
But
in
you're
class.
good at Wait, did you make it?
Probably not. No, the props people probably pre-folded it for me.
Did you actually have to do it, Tim?
Well, yeah, you saw me. I threw
Did it
an
actually hit him?
Yeah.
Did it hurt?
I don't think so. It's a paper airplane. That doesn't really hurt. Do you think I look like I did then now?
Your hair. Kinda. Wait, who are the people who are watching this gonna be?
Who are listening?
Yeah.
Probably people mostly my age or like slightly younger than me who grew up watching Boy Meets World. Like people who remember it from when they were younger. Do you have anything you want to say to those people?
Hi, and I think you're right because Boy Meets World is a good show.
Oh, thanks, dude. I think that's nice.
Oh, and I hope they agree that there's too much shirts in the first episode. Too many shirts now that I think about it.
Yeah, you just sort of blurted out too much shirts. But now we're calling this whole segment Too Much Shirts.
Yeah, we want to make t-shirts of it.
Yeah.
Too much shirt. Okay. Bye-bye, people.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, but it was so, like the main storyline with Cory didn't really resonate beyond Cory liking baseball. Like that was,
right.
What he.
No, but the Eric storyline, he's trying to get backstage passes, and but like he picked up all those subtle nuances of which they wrote none.
I'm happy he had noticed I wasn't there. Makes me feel loved.
Totally. No, he was very concerned. It was like, where's she? Because the
last
episode we watched was all about her.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Where'd she go? That is so cute. He now knows too many shirts.
Yeah, he corrected himself
now that
right
I think
away.
about it. Now that I think about it.
Now that I think about it.
Yeah, he's a little embarrassed, I think, that's become the catchphrase because it makes him sound young. And, doesn't know.
It's so
But I think
cute.
it's so funny.
So we're in Feeny's classroom. Minkus is back to his normal attire, saying he is more of a Connie Chung kind of guy than a Cindy Crawford guy. And Cory asks Minkus a geography question that was in the tournament, that basically the one he lost on. And Minkus has the answer right away. Cory tells Mr. Feeny he tried his hardest, but Minkus would have taken home the trophy. And Mr. Feeny shows Cory that he actually got an A on this week's exam. It's his first ever A from Feeny. And Mr. Feeny has the very cute moment with Cory where he walks over and he puts the A test up on the board
where the plaque goes,
where the tournament plaque would normally have gone had he won. And again, we see this very cute moment, and Ben and Bill actually high five. I thought it's very cute.
It was great.
I welled up. I can't help it.
Wow, you're going to cry every episode.
You're a weller.
I thought that Superman line in that one episode really got me, but I haven't quite welled up since.
This was a moderate, like a minor well up. It wasn't on par with the Superman well up, but that feeling of like, I think a lot about having kids now of my own. I think a lot about what the best way is of encouraging them and of giving them compliments for when they work really hard. Like I naturally have a tendency to say good job about just about everything. And then I realize like that isn't actually helpful. What's really helpful is when I can tell that he's really worked at something, being like, wow, I can see how hard you worked at that. And so I try to be very like aware of that language that I use and what I give him compliments on. And so seeing it happen with Feeny in this place and imagining like knowing the kind of pride you get when you've done something and you've achieved something, it just made, it made me well up thinking that Feeny gave this boy that truthfully is really hard on. Like he's really hard on Cory, and for valid reason. Cory is, not necessarily the greatest student or whatever. He's constantly coming up with issues, but seeing him go out of his way to do the opposite, to really drive home the point that he is smart and that his effort was worth something and that he's proud of him is what made me well up. Is like, you made Feeny proud. And don't we all want that feeling of making Feeny proud?
Well, there is that kind of realization with Feeny that whether it's compliments or whatever it is, or education or learning, you have to earn it. You always have to earn it with him, and I liked that. Yeah. That's kind of how we felt. It sounds so strange, but people always ask, like, were William Daniels and Mr. Feeny similar? And I always felt that way with Bill when it came to compliments with him about acting or our conduct on the set. I felt like I had to earn it. And I liked that. I liked feeling like I wanted to earn his respect, and I feel like I did eventually. But that's what I felt like that this moment with Feeny, where it's like, look what you earned. Like you did this, you studied, you put in the time, and you earned the high five. And I thought that was really cool. Yeah.
So the tag is in the Matthews family living room. Cory is watching a baseball game. The announcer says that the Batgirl has run onto the field with a protest banner. And then we see them have, again, the discussion that's in the geography tournament. And I couldn't really tell what the joke was. Is the joke that even the baseball announcer knows the answer to this question and like everyone knows it? How did he not know?
Yeah,
I
think it's just that we, because when we're watching the B, we're thinking, this is so obscure. This is so the big joke is that it's not obscure.
It's not.
Anymore. And was this our dialogue coach Christopher Kyer's voice as one of
It might have been Chris Kyer. I was trying to listen to the voiceover. It certainly wasn't one of our writers because I was like, okay, who is this? Is this Manel? I don't think it was one of our writers.
It's not one of our writers, but I remember these lines because we said these as jokes forever. This was like very much an inside joke. I
think it might have been our dialogue coach, Chris Kyer, who was at the time. He had retired, obviously, but at the time was the youngest ringmaster in the history of the Ringling Barnum and Bailey Circus. He was ringmaster at the age of 23 or something like that.
We should get Chris Kyer on the show to talk to him.
He's still good friends with Dee Dee, I believe, or somebody. He's still good friends with somebody.
He's also friends with Tony O'Dell, who is a dialogue coach in my world.
And a great guy. He was always very nice and very helpful, so it was great.
Yeah, I think we should try to get him on the show. That would be great. One of my favorite lines, just to recap in this episode, one of my favorite lines is when we've seen Minkus in the big yellow shants, and Mr. Feeny says, "Sometimes a man doesn't know another." Yeah, sometimes a man doesn't know a struggle until he's walked a mile in another man's humongous pants.
Humongous pants.
I thought it just made me laugh, and his delivery of it was so great. It's one of my favorites. Yep. So thank you for joining us for this episode. Next week, we are going to be recapping Season 1, Episode 6, Boys to Mensa, which originally aired on October 29th, 1993. And we have a very special guest. We will be talking to someone who sat in the death chair. We will be talking to Marty York. We're very excited to have him. Looking forward to catching up with him. And
also known for The Sandlot.
Yeah,
sure we have some Sandlot fans out there.
Oh yes, how could you forget The Sandlot? Yeah. So, but we have someone who actually sat in the death chair. We've done so much talking about it. We'll get to hear what that experience was like. So follow us on Instagram, Pod Meets World Show, and you can email us at podmeetsworldshow@gmail.com. Also, check out our website, podmeetsworldshow.com. We got merch. We got so many shirts.
Merch.
Too much shirts, one might say.
Too much shirts.
And yeah, I had a really good time with you guys as always.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm just going to go hang out in my tiny little bed now, in my tiny little room that hasn't changed since 1984. That's all right.
We love you all. Pod dismissed. Pod Meets World is an iHeart podcast produced and hosted by Danielle Fishel, Will Friedle, and Ryder Strong. Executive producers Jansen Carpe and Amy Sugarman. Executive in charge of production Danielle Romo. Producer and editor Tara Sudbach. Producer Lorraine Virez. Engineer and Boy Meets World superfan Easton Allen. Our theme song is by Kyle Morton of Typhoon. Follow us on Instagram at Pod Meets World Show or email us at podmeetsworldshow@gmail.com.